Hey, welcome to Midas Letter Live. I'm here with Khurram Malik, who's the CEO of Biome Grow Inc., trading on the CSC under Bio, B-I-O, and that's as of October 9th, so
Yes.
yeah, very recent. And right off the bat, I just wanted to ask you about being a new listing, coming into the space, being a bit of a smaller company, and having to compete with the likes of Aurora, Freya, Canopy, those big guys.
No, it's a great question. I mean, why should anyone care about yet another LP? I mean, there's plenty of us out there, and let alone a relatively newer one than some of the more incumbent established ones, which have multi-billion-dollar market caps, like huge amounts of liquidity. What I would tell sort of the investing sort of public out there is, if you look at our pedigree in the space, we've helped, take public or build or done something with, the majority of the really large players in the space because we got involved early. Not that we're geniuses or anything, we got involved early. So we've been studying and analyzing and working in the sector for a while. So all Biome is taking our best learnings from all the, from the prior years in terms of what worked and didn't work, and building a more efficient mousetrap. But also recognizing we're later to the game, so you can't compete head to head against a Canopy, an Aurora, or an Afria, for example. So, but the good thing about the sector is it's still pretty young. So by definition, whether it's medical or recreational coming online, but young sectors are highly inefficient, which means there's a lot of opportunities in the sector that are being ignored by incumbents. So what we're initially doing in this company, and it may look a little weird from the outside looking in, but it all sort of ties together in the coming years, is going and filling holes and gaps other people do not exist, are sort of filling right now. Dominating those holes and gaps and inefficiencies, and when you're a little bit larger, let's say 12 months from now, then you go head to head against the incumbents.
So, well, speaking of some of the, I guess, missteps some of the bigger guys have had, could you point to, I don't know, just one or two things that you've been able to not have to deal with?
Sure. So, I mean, if you were building a facility and you had a decent balance sheet, let's say 3 years ago or 2 years ago when it was very much medical and there was no real sniff of recreational anytime soon. The philosophy was, and quite frankly, we were advising the same thing, so we're at fault here as well, but who knew in those days? Was plunk 1 million square feet down somewhere and then supply all of Canada, or put it in a jurisdiction where you've got the lowest power costs, like in Alberta or New Brunswick or Quebec, for example, and you'd be good to go. What we found out shortly thereafter was that Health Canada or the federal government was going to punt all distribution responsibilities to the provinces. And then, obviously you can have regional biases and support and all that, which means, supplying the entire country from one massive facility in one province is not going to work. So we said, okay, fine. So when we were designing this company, we decided to set up facilities in each one of these underserved provinces where there really weren't a lot of LPs, and build local brands, or what we call biomes or local ecosystems. And that works in some provinces and not others. So the cool thing about Atlantic Canada is if you build local, brand local, supply local, employ local, and quite frankly have investors that are local in your company, they'll be more loyal to your product, provided you provide a quality product, than somebody importing product into those provinces. Ontario is an interesting contrast. We don't care. We'll buy from anybody. Ontario-made product, whatever, right? So whereas in Nova Scotia, and particularly Newfoundland, PEI, even New Brunswick, that's not the case. Newfoundland, I think, is the extreme example. To some degree, they still consider themselves Newfoundlanders before Canadians, right? Later to the Union, right? So and there was no licenses even to this day in Newfoundland. We should be the first one. Hopefully, in the next few months, they're licensed, provided Health Canada cooperates. So building a local brand there, it's very powerful. There's an argument in this industry right now. What is a cannabis brand? You can have a recreational brand, a company brand, a pan-Canadian brand. Those are all legitimate ways of doing it. I think we're the only ones that are building provincial brands which are very unique to our provinces. So if you're a Nova Scotia consumer, you're buying our Highland Grow product. You're not buying a Biome product, which is an interesting way of looking at it. If you're in Newfoundland, for example, you're buying a back home cannabis company product. Biome is nowhere on the packaging. We've got local people that are local board members, local university partnerships, local R&D partnerships with the governments as well, let alone the local control boards. So and educational partnerships as well. So these are very entrenched ecosystems we're building in our province. So when supply and demand normalizes in 2020, and you're competing head to head against the big guys that have greater, let's say, resources, it's a very defensible position to have because you're locally well entrenched to have that ecosystem. It's harder for an Ontario company to come in and try to flood the market with product.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with putting down roots and giving people pride. I mean, that's a very powerful thing. So let's get into some of the subsidiaries we're talking about here. Highland Grow, Nova Scotia, expanding to 100,000 square feet. Do you want to just elaborate on some of the specific
sure.
sites you have
So we've announced 3 sites, a 4th one shortly to be announced. It adds up to roughly 400,000 square feet of production space in Canada. If I build a single square foot beyond that, I would be very surprised. for a few reasons. First of all, Canada is the most expensive place in the world to grow cannabis. So we're not that interested in being a large production footprint in Canada. And by and large, if we're not doing the bulk of our sales overseas in the next 2 or 3 years, I've badly executed this company, and so has our management team. It's a small population in Canada. There are plenty of licenses here. We're doing the Atlantic Canadian sort of focus. That's our Canadian beachhead. It's our home country. We'll do that. But this is really an international medical marijuana company story. We are coming online with international jurisdictions in the coming months and through 2019, which I think will be very disruptive to the industry in how we do it. And that's really where the bulk of the cash flows are going to come from. But obviously in the interim, we've got rec as well as medical here in Canada, primarily focused on Canada.
So when you talk international, is there, obviously there are some places more attractive than others, but are you prepared to kind of say where you're most interested in?
Unfortunately, I can't, since we're a publicly traded company now,
Right.
so I've got to be a little muzzled. But here's what I can tell you: our philosophy international. Again, as I spoke about earlier, we go where other people are not. So if you look at the larger players who've got the bandwidth to go overseas, they're primarily focusing on Western Europe, like Germany or Brazil or South Africa or Australia, for legitimate reasons. Great markets. In some cases, the regs are considerably better than what we have here in Canada related to medical cannabis, because they've looked at what we did in Canada and improved on it. And that's fine. We may do those jurisdictions at some point, but we're a small company. You got to pick your spots. So we're going to jurisdictions where nobody exists right now, and in some cases, helping to write the regulations. So what that affords us is first in the door, hopefully some exclusivity, and the other sort of privileges and benefits, and so that sort of meet our constraints or requirements. So that's, again, very different. So we'll hopefully be announcing some of that in the coming months and quarters. We're, first one in the door. And that's, I think, is more powerful because these countries, at the end of the day, have considerably larger populations than Canada does. We're 32, 33 million people. Yeah, it's small. Whereas, these other countries are multiples of that.
I wanted to, before I forget, because you guys have this VR retail catalog, and I've experienced it before, but can you just tell our viewers a little bit about that and
Sure.
why you did that in the first place?
We aggressively deploy innovation and technology in our company, whether it's on the growing side of things or other side of things. So this is on the more consumer-facing side of things. We found a Canadian cannabis technology which we liked, which is rare. Most of the innovation, unfortunately, in cannabis does not happen in Canada. We just have large balance sheets on production facilities. A lot of it happens in the US and Europe and Israel. So we did find an interesting one here. It was filling a problem that was in the sector, which is, again, the philosophy of this company: go and fix a problem or an inefficiency. And the problem was that if you look at all these retail stores that are coming online post-recreational and going live, they're not conducive for the casual consumer to buy cannabis. So traditionally, if you don't know what you're doing as a consumer, you traditionally would go into a dispensary, legal or not, in a jurisdiction, and spend about 10, 20, 30 minutes with a bud tender. And he or she would walk you through the safe ways to consume it or this or that. Alternatively, all you can do right now is go online and look at some very good resources, but they're just pages and pages of text. And the human brain can only retain so much information. If you walk into a store, whether it's in Newfoundland or elsewhere, you're going to be in there for like a minute or two or 5 minutes, and they're going to shove you out the door again. So you got to know what you want before you walk in. So what we did with this thing was, this was initially designed as a virtual dispensary for e-commerce, which unfortunately doesn't really apply to Canada yet. So we repurposed the base technology to be an educational platform. So it's a way for a human being to put on some VR goggles and be immersed into a virtual dispensary environment with an avatar, and that will walk you through different strains and how to consume them and what strains work. Okay, these are, for example, the 12 Biome strains or Highland Grow strains in Nova Scotia. You can play around with them, you can turn them into a vaporizer, you can grind them up, you can have tinctures, oils, and it just, the human brain retains that a lot easier than just reading text or whatnot. So it's just it's a way of shortcutting and fixing your problem, and then ultimately it will be an e-commerce platform overseas.
Sure, and I actually think that, and I don't know if you agree, maybe because you have adopted that technology, that there will be, a significant number of people that are willing to dabble that aren't necessarily kind of vets that are going to need that learning experience.
Yeah, so our goal with this is that, look, let's make it as easy as possible for people that are have a little bit of trepidation or relatively new to it, to make it accessible in a safe and effective manner. So you can also just sit in your living room, put on your smartphone, put in one of those $5 Google Cardboard goggles, and you're immersed in a three-dimensional environment, and you're good to go. There's an AR component as well, but it's primarily VR right now. And what's pretty interesting about the sector in general is that it's a controlled substance. So unfortunately, we're very handcuffed in how we can market our product and our company to the end consumer. If you've got retail locations or vertically integrated, that's pretty good. That's one way of doing it. but having robust educational tools and platforms and delivery mechanisms to get out there to your local communities and actually educate people on cannabis, and then and also you, is really the most powerful way, in our opinion, to get your brand out there and establish it in your communities.
Sounds good. Okay, so just looking forward for investors in the next few months and maybe 6-9 months down the road, what can they look for?
I think they can look for, we're going to be a very newsy and with very tangible, not just fluffy news coming out. There's a lot of things we've sort of geared towards being brought across the line around, shortly after going public. So for the next 3 or 4 weeks, or in the next 2 or 3 months, what you're going to see is we're going to be signing a lot of large contracts, which a small company is not supposed to be signing. It'll look really weird. And then when we announce them, we'll sort of educate the broader masses or the investor community on why we were able to pull it off, where typically these things are only signed by the 3 or 4 largest companies in Canada. But we're not that, but we're still getting them across the line. So, and the reasons for that, and we'll reveal those in due course.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to reading those press releases, and hopefully after they've hit the public airwaves, you can get back in here and explain how significant they are.
Happy to.
Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.